everybody, Nick here, and today I've got a conclusion, so to speak, to the series of videos I've been doing talking about mechanical and quartz watches, and what the very best kind of watch is for EDC. And yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've done a couple of videos already. I did an overview of how mechanical watches work and an overview of how quartz watches work. I'm going to link those down below in the little about box. And if you haven't seen those yet, you might consider checking those out first. But as a quick overview, a mechanical watch uses actual mechanical mechanisms, that's kind of redundant, to mark the passage of time. It's got a little wheel that spins back and forth at a fixed rate, and it uses fancy mechanisms to let that wheel turn gears and turn the second hand and minute and hour hand and so forth. Quartz watches, on the other hand, have a little tiny vibrating quartz crystal, which acts a lot like a tuning fork, and so the crystal's in there being vibrated by electricity, and it counts the number of vibrations, basically, from the resonance of this quartz crystal, and figures out how much time is passing that way, and then uses a little motor to step the hands and the gears and so forth. So this is a mechanical watch, and this is a quartz watch. And like I said, I've talked a lot about this, and I've thought a lot about this. And in fact, thinking about this is why I ended up buying this mechanical specifically, because it's a pretty high-end mechanical watch. Not in the grand scheme of high-end, but it's certainly a very good mechanical watch. Very few people would argue with that. So today we're just going to wrap it all up and talk a little bit about whether in your everyday life you should probably be using a quartz watch or a mechanical watch. So let's just jump into it. Okay, so mechanical versus quartz, let's look at the advantages on both sides. For quartz, there are a bunch of them. Price is a big one. Quartz watches are less expensive, period, because it takes a lot of time and effort and engineering to make fancy spring-based watch movements and precision and all kinds of stuff like that, whereas a quartz movement is a fairly basic thing. You get a specialized crystal, you put it with a microchip, throw a battery in there, and you're done. So you can get a $5 quartz watch that works, or a $15 quartz watch that works pretty well. Or, maybe a $300 or a $400, so $300, a $500 watch that's just incredible. Versus on mechanicals, even to get into the low end of the high end, you're looking at $1,500 or something like that. You can get a pretty damn good mechanical for like $400, but still, you're going to pay a lot more for mechanicals, and for a lot fewer features. So that's one big issue to keep in mind. Second advantage is power reserve. So power reserve is basically how long the watch will keep running after you take it off your wrist. So mechanicals are charged, at least automatics are charged by the movement of your wrist. You can see there's that weight rotating in there. Or you can hand wind them for some of them. And you get a power reserve that's generally in the 30 to 40 hour range, which means if you take the watch off your wrist, it'll run just fine for 40 hours, and then it'll stop. And you'll need to rewind it and reset the time next time you put it back on. For quartz watches, if it's got a battery, the battery life is the power reserve. So you're looking at 2 years, 6 years, 10 years, depending on the battery size and the model. And for solar quartz watches, if you leave it on the windowsill, it will just run until the watch dies, which is a beautiful thing. So you've got, a 30-year power reserve, 20-year power reserve, something like that, which is a beautiful thing. And just makes it easier because you're not having to reset your watch as often. So that's beautiful. Another big advantage that quartz has going for it is in complications. So a complication in watchmaking is anything beyond just telling the time. So here we have the day and the date. That's a complication. That's something a little bit beyond telling the time. And on mechanical watches, those need to be done mechanically by adding in more gears and springs and, whatnot. And so they get very expensive very quickly. If you want a stopwatch, you can certainly get it. But you're looking, much more expensive. You're looking, a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 more to get a good stopwatch. Whereas with quartz, they're so easy, they're practically free. And other things like perpetual calendars are very expensive to do with little gears, but are very cheap to do in a quartz watch. And there are complications that just aren't possible in a mechanical watch. For instance, this little guy here is a multi-sensor watch, so it can tell you right now your altitude, 950 feet, or your barometric pressure, or right now, this direction is due east. These are things that are not possible in mechanical watches, and so if you want fancy complications, quartz is the way to go. That's just a beautiful thing. So that's something to keep in mind. Speaking of complications, another one is synchronization. So that means that the watch actually talks to an external source to get the correct time. So this watch, for instance, every night, as does this guy, talks to or listens for the radio signal from the atomic clock, based in Colorado here in the U.S., but there are ones around the world, and we'll check and see whether basically whether it got the signal or not. And so it's pointing to Y right now, which means, yeah, it got a signal. So this is in sync with atomic time, which means that the time on this will always be pretty much dead on accurate, usually within a second or so. Usually less than that, way less than that. Versus your mechanical watches can't do anything like that because it's all springs and gears. It's a different thing, but that's something you really can only get in the watch where there's already some computing power built into it. So that's a nice thing. Some of the new ones are even using GPS, so it can tell not only what time it is, but where you are, and thus what time it should be. Really fancy stuff. Unfortunately, they're still pretty big, but that's going to shrink down, and it's going to be an even cooler thing. So that's nice. Moving on. Another big factor is the service cost. On a watch like this little guy here, which actually uses a battery inside, when that battery dies, I'm going to need to pay like $15-20 to replace it, and that'll be every 2 to 5 years. That's really about it on service costs. I can pay a little more if I want to get it pressure tested, but, you know, what's the point, really? Not an expensive watch. On the other side, with mechanicals, these do need to be actually serviced. You need somebody to go in there, take the whole thing apart, re-lube everything, clean everything up, and, you know, that takes an actual expert. You need to take it to a watchmaker. Take it to a local place, you're looking at maybe $200 for a service every 5 to 7 years. If you've got a more expensive brand like a Rolex or something, you might be looking at closer to $600 or $700, which is getting toward the high end. And certainly if you're looking at your Patek Philippe's, you're going to be spending, you know, $1,000, $2,000 for a service. And you have to build that into the cost of the watch. Every 7 years I own this, I'm going to need to pay a couple $100 more to keep it running, and maybe a little bit more if anything actually breaks. So that's something you really do have to keep in mind in another area where Quartz is way ahead of the game. And on some of your solar watches, you don't even have to do that. So, beautiful. Another issue is your durability. So with Quartz watches, you can beat the holy living crap out of them because it's a little tiny crystal that's in a little metal holder and a little microchip and a battery. There's not that much to break. I mean, you certainly can break the glass or break the plastic, or, you know, with sapphire, you know, that can still break, no doubt. But a quartz watch is just going to be able to take much harder knocks, especially when it's like a tough quartz movement, like Casio is doing, or some of your others. It just, any day of the week, a quartz will take more abuse than an equivalent mechanical. It's just a thing. Similarly, Quartz doesn't give a damn about magnets. I can magnetize the heck out of this Quartz watch, and it's not even going to be an issue. Versus mechanical watches, if you get some of your little springs magnetized in there, the watch will suddenly run absurdly fast. And that's just no good. You need to take it to a watchmaker to demagnetize it. Quartz is just as easily waterproofed, if not more so, and also at the end of the day, Quartz is just cheaper to replace. A cheaper watch is easier to beat on. Because you break it, oh no, I'm out $100 or something like that, as opposed to, oh no, I'm out $1,500. So durability is a big advantage that Quartz has going for it. There's a good reason that no matter whether you love mechanical watches or not, your beater watch should probably be a Quartz, just because it can take it better. Then let's jump into our final point for Quartz here. So the biggest advantage that Quartz watches have over mechanical watches is their accuracy. It is just the case that Quartz watches, due to using a different mechanism, keep time more accurately than mechanical watches. A very, very inexpensive Quartz watch. This is a $5 watch, and it keeps time to the extent where it gains half a second every day. So every day I leave this turned on, it runs a little bit, about half a second faster. This right here is a $1,500, reasonably high-end mechanical watch, and it loses about 5 seconds every day. And that means that, you know, every day I'm 5 seconds further behind, and after a couple of weeks, I'm, you know, about a minute back, and after a full month or 2 months, it just adds right up. And so if you look down at your wrist at a Quartz watch, chances are it's dead on time. And if you look at a mechanical watch, chances are it's not. You can get really super accurate mechanical watches. Like the COSC spec is like -2, +4. And that's pretty damn accurate, but it's never gonna beat even your cheapest watch. So, you know, it's just, it's a simple fact that Quartz watches are just more accurate. And a really high-end Quartz watch, either one with radio control, which will always be dead on, or a high-accuracy thermocompensated Quartz is going to run like 5 or 10 seconds off per year, which is insanely accurate. So that just sucks, but, this watch costs 300 times less than this one, but just spanks it in accuracy. So there you go. Let's talk a little bit about the couple of advantages that mechanicals do have. Mechanical does have some advantages, certainly. So one of these is that there's a lot more variety on the high end. You can get some high-end Quartz watches with really good features, things like your solar, your radio control, perpetual calendars, high accuracy. You can get those, but there are only 5 or 6 companies that are really making them. And so when you kind of select the high-end feature set, pardon me, you're down to maybe 20 models or something like that. And if they don't fit your style, then you're kind of hosed. Mechanicals, on the other hand, there is a huge variety, particularly on the higher end. If you want a mechanical, then you can pretty much find the watch that looks like what you want and has the features that you want if you're willing to pay enough money for it. So that is one frustrating thing as a Quartz collector. Most of Quartz are your cheapo Quartz, and sometimes your cheapo Quartz that's in a really expensive body, like your Shinola, your Coach, your fashion brands, Michael Kors. All of those are not high-end watches, but in terms of movement, but they are very expensive. So that's just something you got to keep in mind. Another kind of along those lines issue is that mechanical watches are really better jewelry, in that people don't tend to make high-end Quartz watch movements and put them in really beautifully designed cases. Yasin here is just, the bracelet is spectacular. The design of it is very nice. Everything, the fit and finish is just great. It's nicely done, it's nicely made. There's just a whole lot of nice here. And the Casio Oceanus here is one of few Quartz watches that actually feels like high-end jewelry, even though it doesn't quite look as nice as Yasin. That's just a simple fact. It's very hard to find a good quality, functionally, with extra functions sort of Quartz watch that also looks really good. So that's another big advantage mechanicals have. If you want something that's jewelry and that's pretty and that's fancy and that's got a great case and a great band and whatnot, you're going to do much better in the mechanical world than you ever will in the Quartz world. Let's move on. A huge advantage that mechanicals have is that they are repairable, because inside there, your mechanical watch is just metal. It's springs and gears and things like that. And those can be fixed. Those can be replaced. They have parts. They can be, things can be polished. Things can be tweaked. There's a whole lot that can be done with a mechanical watch. And even if the part no longer exists, you can make a new one because it's just a piece of metal that's cut in a very precise way. So you can repair anything in a mechanical watch. It's like your car. If your alternator breaks, you can put in a new alternator. As opposed to Quartz watches, which really have 3 states, which is running just fine, out of batteries, and dead as a doornail. When a Quartz watch dies, it's gone. You might be able to replace the movement with a whole new movement on the inside there, but by and large, if your Quartz watch dies, you're buying a new Quartz watch. Case closed. It's over. And so, of course, you need a competent watchmaker to do that, and it may be too expensive to repair certain breakages in a mechanical, but that is a big advantage that mechanicals have going for them, is that repairability. And actually, that leads to another advantage here, which is longevity. A common movement, like this guy's got a little Sellita SW220 movement in there, a common movement should be able to be repaired for a long time. You'll always be able to get parts for your basic ETA movements, and companies that make high-end mechanical watches, like your Rolex, your Seiko, your Omega, keeps big stashes of repair parts, basically, so a watchmaker can contact them and say, hey, I need a new escape wheel or something like that. And so you can get that. And the nice thing is that this means you can really keep the watch going forever and ever and ever. You can keep replacing parts, and so that the same case can stick with you for 50 years. And this means that a mechanical watch could, in theory, be given to your grandchild. And in fact, the Swiss make a lot of marketing. Oh, you're just taking care of the watch for a new generation. But that's true. In theory, you could give your mechanical watch to your great-grandchild if they give a damn. They might not, but who knows. So that is a big advantage mechanicals have going for them. And then finally, the simple fact is that mechanical watches are pretty damn cool. I mean, inside here, you got something that's constantly in motion, that can be completely disassembled and put back together, and still manages to keep time, losing only 5 seconds a day. That's pretty neat. And on the inside, mechanicals are just, I mean, a bunch of little gears and springs. It's excellent, and just to stare at it, it's like, wow, cool. Hold it up to your ear and hear a little ding, 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 ding. Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Mechanical watches have a very tactile sense of awesome to them that quartz watches don't necessarily. I think quartz is really awesome, too, because it's got a little crystal that's vibrating 30,000 times a second and is being processed by microprocessors. I mean, that's cool, too, but mechanicals have a much more tactile interestingness to them. And for some collectors, that's really all that matters. They're listening to all of this and going, yeah, but Nick, look, it's a mechanical watch. It's got springs and stuff, and I don't care. But, you know, some people do, and it is kind of neat. I'll give them that any day of the week. So we come down to the final verdict, and, you know, it's a simple fact that mechanical watches are just great jewelry. They are prettier, by and large. They are much, much fancier. You can get much, much fancier with them. You can get mechanical watches that are just deeply, deeply fancy. Your Pateks and whatnot, you know, made of meteorite slices and crazy things like that. They are also much more expensive, and for many people that's a good thing because they're a better marker of status. If you buy a Patek Philippe, a big part of that is wanting other people to see that you're wearing a Patek Philippe. If you buy a Casio, you don't necessarily want people to know that you're wearing a Casio, unless you're in a position where you don't care. I happen to not really care. But, you know, for some people, just the fact that it is more expensive and has more status is a big thing. Also, mechanicals have much more interesting history. I mean, you've got many, many decades and centuries of horological research looking at, you know, how to make a really interesting watch. And it's a great hobby, and it's an interesting world. I still love reading about mechanical watches and the really high end because it's really cool. But the thing is, none of those things are about the timekeeping. None of those things are about having a functional thing on your watch that tells you what time it is. And at the end of the day, if you just want a nice watch, which is just a functional part of your everyday carry gear, these things just don't matter that much. But these things do. And that's where it comes down to. All of these issues matter functionally for a timepiece that you're going to wear every damn day. And none of these things are just that important. So that's where you land. If you want jewelry, you probably want a mechanical watch or a really high-end quartz sort of watch, fashion watchy thing. But if you actually just need a functional timepiece that's going to be on your wrist every damn day, then quartz is the way to go, flat out. Sorry, mechanical guys, please limit the hate. I acknowledge very much that your passion is there and that these do have more heart and soul, but for EDC, it just doesn't matter. I hope this has been helpful to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day.